My name's Shona Battle. This is my 7th year in 4-H, my 7th year of taking chickens to the fair, and my 5th or 6th year of taking goats to the fair. For my demonstration today, I'm going to be showing you how to cut up food for herbivorous reptiles, in particular a bearded dragon, and I'll also be talking about a bearded dragon's diet as a whole. So first, I'm going to start off with cleaning the vegetables. Preparing vegetables for herbivorous reptiles is very similar to making a salad for yourself. So washing off all the vegetables is very important, especially when you have bioactive enclosures, enclosures where different organisms live, like insects and stuff, because if there's insects on your vegetables, then they could go into your enclosure and cause problems. So this week I'm cutting up yellow squash as well as Swiss chard, watercress, and turnip greens, and I try to change up the greens that I give them every single time I cut up greens, so I have an actual list. Variety is very important with these guys, so I've made a list of greens as well as vegetables and fruits and flowers as well that these guys can eat, and I feed this to my bearded dragon here as well as a Russian tortoise and a green iguana. And I originally started with just the green iguana, and this is what I'd feed him, but luckily all three of them eat this, so I just cut it up for all three. And I will tell you the greens and vegetables and everything that I have that are safe, or that I have listed that are safe, and then I'll tell you the ones that I mainly use. So there's Escarole, Endive, and these are the greens, collard greens, mustard greens, romaine lettuce, turnip greens, kale, dandelion greens, watercress, beet greens, cilantro, and assorted lettuces, but specifically not iceberg lettuce, because iceberg lettuce has very little nutritional value, so try to stay away from that. So then vegetables, they can eat acorn squash, butternut squash, carrot, cucumber, yellow squash, celery, pumpkin, bell peppers, green beans, zucchini, snap peas, and prickly pear pads. And then and that's spineless prickly pear pads. So then for fruit, they can eat mango, watermelon, peaches, pear, kiwi, figs, cantaloupe, blackberry, blueberry, banana, apple, raspberry, grapes, strawberry, and papaya. But with tortoises, like the Russian tortoise, you don't want to feed fruits as much, but if you do, you want to stick with more of the melons. So watermelon, cantaloupe, honeydew, I think that's a melon, and then as well as papaya can be good. And those are only really important if your tortoise is dehydrated, because if it is, then those have a lot of water, and that's when iceberg lettuce can come in handy. It's not harmful, but it just doesn't really help in any way unless your animal's dehydrated. So then other foods as well can be flowers, which I like, rose petals and hibiscus flowers, and I'd say that's more, well, actually all of them are all right with eating that, but I'd feed those more to the green iguana. So then what do I feed regularly? So I have a list of greens and a list of vegetables, and then I splice them. So then I have 2 greens and a vegetable every single time I feed, and then I actually have a list that goes up to like over a year in length, because it takes me about 2 weeks to get through one group of vegetables and greens, and then I have like 45 different combinations because I took so many. So of these are Escarole, Endive, collard greens, mustard greens, romaine lettuce, turnip greens, kale, dandelion greens, watercress, beet greens, and also now Swiss chard as well. And then the vegetables that I use are acorn squash, butternut squash, carrot, cucumber, yellow squash, celery, pumpkin, bell peppers, green beans, zucchini, snap peas. So out of these, as you saw this week, I fed, let me find it here. I'm feeding watercress, turnip greens, yellow squash, and Swiss chard. So I actually meant to only feed watercress, beet greens, and yellow squash, but they didn't have, like, beet greens aren't very much, so I didn't get those. Instead, I got Swiss chard, and then the Swiss chard and the watercress wasn't a whole lot together, so I got turnip greens as well, because turnip greens are pretty good. But for example, last week I fed dandelion greens, kale, and cucumber, which are just completely different, but they are, it's just all part of the variety. So speaking of greens, some of the best ones I would say are dandelion greens. Those pretty much are like something that you could feed a lot and it wouldn't be any trouble for the animals. But again, variety is very important. And then kale is something that you wouldn't want to feed very often. So because of this variety, I don't feed it very often. That's because it can bind calcium in them, and then they can't consume the calcium, which isn't very good because they need calcium. So talking of calcium, they also need supplements. So some important supplements are calcium supplement specifically, and then just a multivitamin. And you can get these on Amazon. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Just a calcium supplement and a multivitamin powder supplement. Real quick, there is just a little bit more to the vitamins than just that. So they are like reptile vitamins. So here is the multivitamin Reptivite by ZoomEd, and then the ReptiCalcium by ZoomEd. Now, the only little bit here is that this is without D3, and the reason for that is because my bearded dragon has a UVB light, as well as my green iguana, as well as my Russian tortoise. They need those because they're all diurnal. But I also have the ReptiCalcium with D3 because I also feed this to. I also give calcium supplement to my geckos, and they are all crepuscular, so they are not out always during the day. And so in the wild, they wouldn't always naturally get D3 the same, so I don't provide a UVB light. That's a different whole video for all of that information, but that's just a little bit about these. But these types of things are very important. There's also more like natural supplements by Arcadia, which is a different brand. And I'm not entirely sure how to get those in the US because Arcadia is, I think, European based, and there's no Arcadia products that I know of that are on Amazon, and Amazon's what I like to use. So for now I'll use these, but in the future there's more like natural type of vitamins that I think I'll be able to give my animals that I won't have to worry about over giving them, because with these types of things, like especially like D3 and stuff, or vitamin D3, they could possibly be given too much of that, and that could be harmful. But if you gave them vitamins that basically, if they got too much, then their body would basically just excrete it and waste. Again, a different demonstration for that, but that was just a real quick thing about supplements. By the way, the noise in the background is actually my tortoise. It is scratching against wood. And now there's different amounts for each of these animals that I'm talking about here, but specifically we're talking about the bearded dragon in this demonstration. So the bearded dragon, I wouldn't dust its greens at all because you don't really need to, but I would dust its insects. So that's another side of the bearded dragon's diet, is it's an omnivore. So it eats both greens, it's both herbivorous as well as carnivorous. Mainly it's more into insects, but once it gets to an adult size like this one, it could eat smaller mice, like pinky mice. But I'll mainly feed insects, and then the different insects that it can eat There's, again, you want variety. Now, specifically, I feed dubia roaches because I actually breed them for a couple of different animals that I have, and then I dust them with calcium supplement, and that's actually right over here. So this is its enclosure stand here. And then this is the calcium supplement, and I'll put them, you can see, he thinks I have insects in it because this is what I'd normally have insects in. So he's probably going to try to attack that. But I'll put the insects in there, and then I'll get them out with tongs, and then I'll feed it to him. But there's other, you'll want to switch it up more than just one thing. So I actually have a couple of other, 2 other colonies of roaches that I'm currently building up right now, and then I'll start to work those into the diet. So different things that you can feed are crickets, which are the most readily available, but roaches tend to be healthier than crickets. There's crickets, hornworms, mealworms, waxworms, earthworms, superworms. Now all the worms are generally more fatty than more protein rich, so they shouldn't be fed as often, but again, variety is very important, so you can always work something into their diet. Feeder roaches, so these would be like the red runner roaches, dubia roaches, and another roach colony that I have are Madagascar hissing cockroaches. Those can also be fed, and there's other species, but I think those are the main ones that people will use. And then there are mice as well. You can feed different sizes of rodents, mainly mice. I probably won't ever do that, but that is something that you can work into a bearded dragon's diet. And those probably won't be fed. Those probably wouldn't be fed as often. And then another thing is hard-boiled or scrambled egg. Now, I have done this. I've hard-boiled it. To me, scrambling an egg just doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you'd have to use like olive oil, and I don't feel comfortable feeding that to a lizard. So I have hard-boiled an egg and fed that to them. Another you can also feed, and that was just a chicken egg. You could also feed like quail eggs because those are smaller and they'd make more sense. You don't want to feed a whole lot of egg because it's really high in protein. You don't want too much protein, but you also don't want too much fat. So there's a balance there. But they're like really, really high in protein. So for adult bearded dragons, they're not as good for them. So like maybe once a month or something. But you could also do quail eggs, which are smaller, as well as reptile eggs. So if some other reptile lays eggs and they're either infertile or you don't want them or something, then the bearded dragon can eat them. And in my case, I fed it a turtle egg once, which aren't hard-shelled. They're actually soft-shelled. I mean the egg in general. So it ate that, and it is currently under a dresser now. So that is both the green vegetables side of its diet, the herbivorous side, and also the carnivorous side, and the supplements. So like I said, with bearded dragons, you're going to want to supplement them. You're going to want to supplement the insects because that is just easier, and you're going to make sure that they have it that way. So another important part of their diet is how often they should be fed. Now, this will change as they age, and this kind of is more based upon experience. It's not exactly for every single dragon they'll eat the same, but as a basis for babies, they should be fed vegetables every single day, and then they should be fed insects 2 to 3 times a day. Now that's a lot for a reptile, but bearded dragons grow very, very fast when they're younger. So that is very important, and then they should be dusted in multivitamin as well. And then for an adult, they can be fed vegetables every day, just like babies. And then when it comes to the insects, they can be fed each day, or even all the way down to like a couple times a week. So not as often as a baby. They do need more of the plant-based. They become more plant-based as they get older. and because they really need that protein while they're growing super fast. So that's basically that. And then also the amount that you feed them is probably a question that a new keeper might have, and that truly is just based upon your bearded dragon's appetite. So basically there's no set amount, just like with how often can be, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you kind of just, you're able to feel that once you have the animal. You can kind of see how much they're eating and then figure out from there. You don't want your animal to become obese, but generally I think that that's not so much of a problem with these guys. As long as you feed healthy foods, they'll eat. They won't end up eating too much. So the amount that you feed is... with insects, with plants, it's kind of, I normally do like a handful, basically however much I feel like he'd eat. So, like I wouldn't give him a ton, but I wouldn't give him like none at all as well. So, he will eat a good amount. It looks like he didn't eat as much today, but he did eat a decent amount today. So basically see however much he will eat, that's how many greens I give him every day. And then for insects, I give him a couple insects every day. So generally like 3 like adult size dubia roaches, and dubia roaches are pretty big. They're about like 1 to 2 inches long. So that's a good amount of food for him, I think. And sometimes I give him more than that. Sometimes I give him less than that each day. So it kind of just depends. But he would just really gorge himself in insects. So and he is a little bit underweight. So I should probably be giving him a little bit more. And even like the more fatty foods might be all right for him right now. But I will just stick with dubia roaches as of right now. And the reason that he's underweight is because I actually adopted this bearded dragon. I adopted him from the Wyandotte County Humane Society, and I do believe that he has some type of internal parasite. So I currently have him in this quarantine tank. That's why it's so small, and that's why it has paper towel. It's because I don't want him to interact with any of my other animals or anything, so this is in my room either. So that is his deal right now, but he'll get a much bigger tank, 2 to 3 times the size of tank, as well as like bioactive soil and everything for him to dig around in and just explore and everything, because he is quite active, as you can see there. So that is why this situation, but that's an important part of getting a reptile, especially if you have other reptiles. Quarantine them before you put them into their final enclosure, because you don't want to realize they have something like internal parasites or external parasites and then have to redo their entire enclosure, because when you do something that's bioactive, it's quite costly and you don't want to have to throw all that out, especially when there's plants and insects and all different types of things. The cost really builds up and you just don't want to have to throw that out. So there's a lot that goes into keeping these guys, but diet is a major section of it. So that is now covered. This is my demonstration. As I said, I do have other reptiles that eat this, specifically the plants that you saw me cut up earlier in the video. One of those is my Russian tortoise right here. And again, also in quarantine, just because I just got her, I think a couple weeks ago now. I do believe it's a female. It's relatively small, probably a juvenile Russian tortoise. And this isn't a proper size enclosure as well, because like I said, she's in quarantine. She doesn't seem to have anything wrong with her. She seems to be pooping, eating, doing everything she's supposed to be, which is the purpose of quarantine. And I gave her this type of bedding because they are burrowing species, and this isn't a whole lot. There's like maybe an inch or less than that of bedding across this. And that's why I gave that to her, even though she's in quarantine. But also she seemed very healthy when she came in, so I didn't worry about it. And I will be moving her into the reptile room pretty soon, or my bedroom. But this is just the enclosure I got with her, and that's why it's this size. This is about, I want to say like 18 inches by 3 feet maybe. So 1.5 feet by 3 feet. Not enough for her. She needs like at least like 2 feet by 4 feet of area because she is a Russian tortoise. So, and as you could hear earlier, she was scratching at the corner because she wants more space and she wants to be able to dig. So I'll supply those things. So now I'll show you my green iguana who also eats vegetables. So she's on a purely vegetable-based diet. So here is the green iguana, Charlie. He is in quite a messy enclosure currently because I will be upgrading him. These marks on the glass aren't from a spray bottle or anything. Those are actually because green iguanas always sneeze, like constantly, like a lot. I mean, just sitting there, they'll sneeze a lot. I don't know if you've seen like documentaries on marine iguanas, but they'll sit on the rocks and they'll just like launch off sneezes, and it's because especially for those iguanas, they'll inhale a lot of salt and stuff, and they're getting rid of that. So that's why it's making all these stains, is because it's minerals and stuff, and when they don't need that, they get it out of their bodies. So that is why the glass is all gross. But this is the green iguana, the original reptile. I've had him for about 2 years, over 2 years now, 2 years and a couple months, while I've only had my bearded dragon for a little over a month and the Russian tortoise for a couple weeks. So he's been doing very well. He came in much smaller, and I feed him that varied diet, and that's all he gets, as well as the normal supplements, multivitamin and calcium vitamin as well. So, calcium supplement. So this has been my demonstration for the 2020 4-H year. Been quite an interesting one, but luckily I could still find veggies and everything for these guys at the supermarket. Hope that you enjoyed. Stay healthy and stay safe. Sorry for the more lengthy demonstration, but it was a lot to get out, and have a great day.